Welcome back to Pokemon Episode Summaries. Today, I'll be doing another episode of Pokemon Chronicles, focusing on Meowth, the last one being its niece Azurill in great trouble. The episode begins with Azurill preparing another feast filled with fruit and other food to celebrate its visiting child, Azurill. Even though it was already tired from yesterday's feast that it held for Azurill and all the other Pokemon, including Meowth, it was so determined to make sure that its kid was happy that it would keep making feasts. Eventually, this feast took place, and it went well, with the Pichu brothers being invited as well, because after the feast, the Azurill had wanted the two Pichu brothers to play with Azurill, and they agreed. The two Pichu brothers were playing tag with Azurill, to be specific. Well, at least one of the Pichu brothers was, as it followed the Azurill, trying to find it. While it was looking around for Azurill, it actually found its brother hiding in a bush by Azumarill's table, and it saw that when Azumarill wasn't looking, its brother went to go take an acorn that was left on the table, being left over from the feast. However, the brother that noticed this stopped its brother from stealing the acorn by going underneath the table and startling it, and it began to yell at it for trying to steal, leading the brother that was being yelled at to question why its brother wasn't with Azurill instead of scolding it, leading the two brothers to realize that they had both lost track of Azurill, and now they truly didn't know where it was. Meanwhile, as for Meowth, he was aimlessly walking through Big Town, especially a lot of the back alleys, hoping to find some food, as he was very tired and bored and hungry as fuck, so he figured food could solve all these problems, hoping that the end of one of the back alleys would help him find his purpose in life. Just then, as he looked up near the sky, hoping that the sky would have his purpose as well, he instead saw Skitty sleeping on a balcony in a building above him. Meowth instantly fell in love with the Skitty. Once again, a fucking Hoenn Pokemon, even though we were in Johto, and he tried to blow Skitty a kiss by using a spare smoke bomb that Jesse and James had gave him to create a cloud of smoke that was shaped like a kiss, and this floated up to Skitty, but Skitty remained asleep and wagged its tail in its sleep, which blowed out the kiss, or the puff cloud of smoke that was shaped like a kiss, rather, and Meowth was disappointed by this, sighing that it wasn't meant to be, being a relationship between him and Skitty that he really wanted. Although, even though Meowth just said this, he couldn't fucking accept it, because he was too much of a simp for Skitty. So, he tried to call up to the Skitty, and tried to get its attention by reciting a nice poem, or at least a poem that he thought would be nice, but he then realized that he couldn't do poetry well at all, as he couldn't even rhyme once. Skitty was obviously not interested in Meowth's failed poem, and it didn't even fucking know about it, because it didn't even wake up, it just continued to sleep, leading Meowth to sadly walk away, truly giving up. Meanwhile, the two Pichu brothers had decided to gather a search party to search for the Azurill by going back to their hideout, where all their friends lived, the tire playground, and they called out their posse for the search party, consisting of Smoochum, Teddiursa, and Magby. All the Pokemon then began searching the city, and as they walked down an alley, they saw Azurill bounce by, so the Pokemon gave chase. But they weren't able to get to Azurill fast enough, as Azurill bounced out of the alleyway and onto a busy highway, crossing it happily, not knowing the danger of potentially getting hit by goddamn cars. Thankfully, even though Azurill was bouncing on the busy street, almost getting hit by semi after truck after car, Azurill somehow made it across completely unharmed. Despite this, the big Pichu brother declared that all the Pokemon were to use as the safer option, the crosswalk, as it led all the Pokemon across it. Once they were across, all the Pokemon continued to follow Azurill as it arrived in an alley, and ended up jumping off of a Wooper bathing in a barrel of water, allowing it to reach a box above the Wooper and continue on beyond that. The Wooper, who was the same one as in all the previous Meow shorts, then got trampled by the Pichu brothers and the rest of the search party as they continued to follow after Azurill. Obviously startling Wooper, therefore confusing it a bit, as well as angering it a bit, because it was angry about getting fucking its head stomped on, but it was also curious as to what all of its friends were doing, so it followed after them, joining the Pichu bros and all the other Pokemon in their chase after Azurill. Meanwhile, back with Meowth, he was still sad walking through the streets when he suddenly found a wedding dress covered in roses in a shop window. He knew he couldn't give Skitty the actual dress, so he quickly took all of the flowers off the dress and decided to give all these flowers, being roses, to Skitty, and put them in a bouquet, hoping to impress Skitty with it. Meanwhile, back with the Azurill and all the Pokemon chasing it, Azurill's next destination that it happily bounced to was the harbor, as the search party continued to follow, seeing it jump into the water, or at least try to, and they all certainly thought that Azurill was bound to hit the water, but then a Feraligatr leaped out of the water right before Azurill could hit it, meaning that Azurill simply bounced off of the Feraligator's back and made it to the other side of the harbor, completely going over the river, and now heading into another alleyway. After this had happened, all the Pokemon could do at first was just stare in awe as the Azurill continued down the alleyway, utterly shell-shocked by how fucking stupid and weird that situation was, with Feraligatr popping out of the water, with all of them commenting how lucky Azurill seemed to be. They all then remembered they were trying to get to Azurill, though, so they snapped out of their shock and questioned how they were going to get over the river, only to see a bridge nearby. So they crossed the bridge and chased Azurill down the alleyway. Meanwhile, as for Meowth, it had come just below the balcony where Skitty was sleeping, so it could deliver the flowers, and Meowth quickly found a ladder and tilted it up so that he could climb up it to reach Skitty and present her with his bouquet of flowers. He almost slipped off the ladder as he climbed it, though, because he was blushing so hard, hoping that Skitty would appreciate the gift. While this was going on, our two stories this episode converged, as Azurill came out of the alleyway, right at the bottom of the ladder, and it saw Meowth with the roses, and it wanted them for itself. So it used its tail to bounce up onto some clothes hanging in between the Skitty's balcony and another balcony, since they were drying on ropes. As Azurill bounced on them, though, and tried to go after the roses, it got caught in some of the clothes, but this didn't stop it from jumping onto the balcony while dragging the attached clothes with it, taking them off of the ropes that they were drying on. Right before Azurill arrived on the balcony, Meowth had climbed up to the top to greet Skitty, and Meowth puckered up his lips as he presented the bouquet of roses to her, ready to receive a kiss in exchange, only to instead find out that Skitty was asleep, so he had to wait for Skitty to wake up first. But while he was waiting, it was then that Azurill arrived on the balcony. But instead of landing on the balcony itself, it actually ended up landing directly on Meowth's roses, and took the opportunity to grab the roses and bounce off of Meowth away with them, leaving the clothes that were attached to it in Meowth's arms now, as it was able to shake them off as it bounced. Meowth was very confused to see the bouquet of roses in his hand replaced with a pile of clothes, and he replayed what had just happened in his head to fully realize that Azurill, by accident, had replaced the roses with the laundry it was carrying. Because it didn't want to do that, it really just wanted to take the roses. Anyways, Skitty woke up from all the ruckus that Azurill had caused, and the first thing it saw was Meowth, appearing to be presenting it with a pile of clothes, as opposed to something beautiful like roses. So, Skitty got angry and used Slash on Meowth, right in the face, combined with a scratch and Fury Swipes, causing him to fall off the ladder. Still registering what the fuck happened, wondering where the fuck Azurill could have went with his goddamn roses, because if he had the roses, none of this would have happened. Skitty then goes back inside of the actual building, instead of being on the balcony, as Meowth looks up to see the Azurill still bouncing across several buildings with his roses, bouncing very happily. Meowth was obviously fucking depressed by this, but he didn't give up as he tried another way to impress Skitty. As he waited for Skitty to come back out by the balcony, even though it was still inside, but, it could look out onto the balcony, and he climbed back up the ladder and presented Skitty with a cake this time, with a strawberry on top and everything. However, as Meowth presented the cake, Azurill happened to bounce by and ate the cake before taking off again, bouncing to another building. This led Skitty to see Meowth only presenting an empty plate, as it was only alerted to Meowth from the ruckus of Azurill yet again. And because of seeing this empty plate, Skitty closed the window on Meowth's face, hitting Meowth, startling him, to the point where he ended up dropping the plate and smashing it against the wall, which only pissed Skitty off further. Meowth then went back down the ladder, and soon came back up, ready to present Skitty with one more thing. Hopefully, it would work, being some guitar music with his own guitar. For once, Meowth's offer of affection actually seemed to be working, as the awesome guitar music, and also Meowth's singing, caused Skitty to come to the window, and come outside, back onto the balcony, wanting to get a better listen. However, Azurill also came by to the balcony, also liking Meowth's music, as it happily bounced and danced, which pissed Meowth off, as he wasn't trying to impress the Azurill, and he didn't like its hopping moves. So Meowth took out his anger on Azurill by trying to crush it with his guitar, but by accident, he missed his hit and instead bashed Skitty with the guitar. And Meowth instantly freaked out, trying to apologize, stating that he was intending to hit the Azurill, not the Skitty, but Skitty didn't believe him. So she went back inside, after scratching Meowth, and closed the window shutters, which, combined with the injury from the scratch, caused Meowth to fall off of the building and down the ladder, hitting the ground hard, and knocking the ladder down as well, along with his now fucked up guitar. Meowth knew that all of his chances with Skitty were now blown, and he started to cry. While still crying, he looked up and saw Azurill laughing at him for crying, from still up on Skitty's balcony. As Meowth heard this laughter of mockery and saw Azurill happily jumping still, he became very angry and declared he was gonna get his revenge, as he started angrily yelling at Azurill and climbs back up the ladder to get to the balcony so he could try and chase Azurill off so that it died from the fall. Meanwhile, the two Pichu brothers and all the other Pokemon were searching for Azurill still, as they walk through the alleyway, and they hear Meowth still yelling at the Azurill, and hear it chasing it, as they then spot Azurill on the rooftops, as Meowth was now chasing it across several buildings. The Pichu Bros and the Pokemon then panicked, as they saw Azurill come to the edge of one of the buildings, and it began to lose its balance, leading Meowth to taunt that he'd like to see both the actual Azurill crushed when it hit the ground, as well as its dreams. Right as the Azurill was falling off the building, though, the Pichu Bros and all the Pokemon showed up right under the building, and the big Pichu instructed Wooper to use Water Gun, and Smoochum picked up Wooper to help it get a better aim with its Water Gun, basically with the idea to try and launch a Water Gun to break Azurill's fall. However, this wasn't necessary, as right before the Azurill fell off, it was able to regain its balance, leading Meowth to simply try and push it off again. So, Smoochum told Wooper to now use its aimed water gun, still with the intention of breaking Azurill's fall, but before Meowth could get to Azurill to try and push it off again, Azurill was able to bounce out of the way right as Wooper fired a water gun, meaning this water gun hit Meowth and sent just him blasting off. Just then, though, as Azurill was bouncing around, it ended up bouncing off a tarp, meaning that it ended up falling off anyways. However, all of the Pokemon were able to catch Azurill before it got injured and hit the ground. All the Pokemon then hugged the Azumarill, glad the little one was okay, as they went to go take it back to its mother, Azumarill. As for Meowth, when he blasted off, he landed on a street on the other side of Big Town. Meowth wondered if his day could get any worse, as he was still sad about not only being blasted off, but also not being able to win over Skitty. Meowth doesn't get much more of a chance to mull over his depression, though, because he then passes out when a nearby Snorlax ends up rolling over on top of him, squishing him. Of course, the Snorlax was asleep, as usual. Meanwhile, the Azumarill had finished preparing its next feast for Azurill, and Azurill and all the other Pokemon returned to Azumarill, and they all had a huge-ass fruit feast, much to the joy of all the Pokemon, since the food was so good. All the Pokemon and Azurill are then treated to another meal by Azumarill once all the Pokemon tell Azumarill about how they had saved Azurill, so essentially, it was a thank you meal. The episode then ends with Meowth managing to recover from getting run over by the Snorlax as he returns to his rooftop apartment, and came to the conclusion that he set his goals too high, having a goal of, getting jobs, making permanent friends, fucking getting a girlfriend Skitty, building a statue. No, those were all stupid goals. He came to the conclusion that what he should do for the remainder of his last day on vacation was just get some much-needed rest, since he would have to return back to Jesse and James to help them with their evil Team Rocket plans in hopes that they could get a promotion from Giovanni. Meowth was kind of sad his vacation was over, but he was kind of ready to get back into action after all the bad shit that happened to him.